Last November, my subcommittee on space science and competitiveness held the first congressional hearings on artificial intelligence, both the opportunities and the challenges and threats posed by artificial intelligence. Among the promise artificial intelligence presents is the opportunity to unleash a technological revolution that the world has not seen since the creation of the Internet. And it could impact every sector of our economy. A 2016 Accenture report predicted that artificial intelligence could double annual economic growth rates by 2035 and boost labor productivity up to 40%. So these are exciting new opportunities for our economy, but at the same time, this technology produces challenges that could have very significant impacts in labor markets, and a real need to secure the privacies of individuals and to guard against threats, in particular in the cybersecurity space. In an interview with Wired magazine last year, President Obama stated, quote, "Then there could be an algorithm that said, go penetrate the nuclear codes and figure out how to launch some missiles. If that's its only job, if it's self-teaching, and it's just a really effective algorithm, then you've got problems." I think my directive to my national security team is don't worry as much about machines taking over the world. Worry about the capacity of either non-state actors or hostile actors to penetrate systems. And in that sense, it is not conceptually different than a lot of the cybersecurity work we're doing. My question for each of you is what impact is artificial intelligence having on how we currently approach cybersecurity? And how will that approach have to change over the next decade?
So, Senator, I think one of the points you make is a very good one, which is we can't be naive to think that artificial intelligence will only be used by defenders. And one of the things that we see in cybersecurity is very often the attackers are able to implement new technologies more rapidly. So having an attacker use artificial intelligence for what we call victim selection, essentially the scenario you outlined where it's identifying the place in an organization or an environment that they'll be most successful, is some of what we're starting to see today. The good news is if we recognize that and start planning for the bad actors to have that weaponry in their arsenal today, we can build strong defenses and most effectively use this same technology to build strong capabilities as well. And that's what a lot of us at the table are doing in our businesses to try to get ready for those scenarios.
Senator Cruz, I think it's important in what you talked about in terms of the potential, and I agree with Mr. Grobman, but I also think that we've proven today that we can use artificial intelligence to stop malicious code from happening. I think it's also possible to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to deal with the identity problem and do continuous authentication to know that Malcolm is Malcolm, his machine is his machine, and allow him to do the things that he needs to do as a user. And I also think it's possible to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to disrupt and stop denial of service attacks, like what we saw with Dyn. I think we have to use these technologies, use the advanced algorithms, use the math and the science, and place them in the right spots to really get at the heart of the problems and better predict, prevent these problems to begin with. And then if we can't, because you cannot eliminate the full vulnerabilities, then you have to use that technology to speed up the detection and response and mitigate and slow the potential for harm.
One of the threats that we heard testimony about at the November hearing on artificial intelligence was a cybersecurity threat as more and more decision-making is based on big data. A cybersecurity threat that doesn't come in and shut down a system in a way that it's obvious that it's been hacked, but rather that goes and alters the data set that is being relied upon for artificial intelligence to make decision-making and to alter the data set in a way that it's not immediately evident, but changes the decision-making in a way that could have significant consequences. And that struck me as a particularly difficult form of cyber threat to respond to. I'd be interested in your...
So I think one of the things that we see in any new cyber defense technology is as soon as it gains traction in the industry, the attackers look for ways to create countermeasures, evasion tactics. A few years ago, the industry was very focused on what we call sandbox detonation. Essentially, try running in unknown executable in a safe environment to see if it had malicious behavior. Very quickly, the adversaries would try to fingerprint to detect, am I running in that environment? And I think we can expect that same mindset for the adversaries as the industry embraces AI-based defenses. So it's one of the things we're looking at is really understanding the attacker's point of view. How will they use machine learning poisoning? How will they poison the models? How will they force defenders to recalibrate their defenses because they send a lot of false positives that are very costly for their operations center, and really recognizing that at the beginning will allow us to build more resilient capabilities.
Senator Cruz, if I can add a different dimension, we are, I think, in the golden age of AI. In the next probably 15 to 20 years, we get to the point where we can do a lot of very impressive things. But now it's a war for talent. We need to make sure that we get the best AI folks. From where I come from in Silicon Valley, Facebook, Google, they spend, I'm not kidding you, millions of dollars trying to get the best AI folks to join them. And this global talent spread all over. My point of view is let's figure out a way to make sure that we can get the best AI talent from all over the world to come here to our universities, and more importantly, stay here and create companies here.
Senator Cruz, specific to your question around a data integrity attack, we have to look at how would a data integrity attack occur.
Right.
One would be, I own your system, and I own the database, which means malicious code was placed on that. So the way to mitigate that is to prevent malicious code from executing. The other way that would be simply there is I own your identity, or I'm an insider, and I change the data. And again, there's ways to do the authentication to validate the individual, and then there's back-end detection on the data integrity. And I think, as was mentioned earlier with blockchaining, I think that's a great way to ensure some level of data integrity out in the future and use that for critical data to give you a higher level of trust.
You know, I think one of the challenges in the question you posed is that there's a lot of data behind that, right? And you're not looking for the needle in the haystack. There's no one sending up a big bright red flare, right? You're trying to find a needle in a stack of needles with everything else that's going on. And interestingly enough, I think the solution to the problem is also artificial intelligence and cognitive systems. You know, I've had the opportunity over the last year to watch Watson grow up, and literally, it was like watching a child grow up. There was an early day where it couldn't understand what ransomware was because it wasn't in the dictionary. So it thought ransomware was a city, right? Okay, well, I can kind of see how it would make that mistake. And then we got to the point, almost like it was in college, where we were grading papers, going, hey, you got an A on this one. This one you still need a little work to do. But we're at the point now where we're putting this up against talented security teams, augmenting their skills, and what it's doing is giving them that peripheral awareness to go, hey, something very unusual and obscure, very much to your example, Senator, happened over here. Why is that happening? Have I seen it before? Is there a research paper that talks about this? Is there another threat intelligence company that's identifying this? And it's bringing that level of awareness right to the surface, but with an evidence-based conclusion. And that ultimately is the type of thing we need to combat the exact same threat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. I think we've exhausted